The Crithian Empire had never known defeat. For 3,000 cycles, they had carved their dominion across 17 star systems, subjugating species after species with methodical precision. Their strategy was always the same: identify a species showing signs of technological advancement, study them from the shadows, then strike when they were most vulnerable. It had worked flawlessly for millennia, until they met humanity. Nia stood at the observation deck of the Defiant, watching the debris field that had once been the Crithian assault fleet. Twisted metal and frozen atmosphere crystals caught the light of the distant sun, creating a macabre light show against the black canvas of space. She felt no triumph, only exhaustion. Her dark hair was matted with sweat, and her uniform bore scorch marks from the battle that had raged for 18 hours straight. "They thought they had us," Liam said, stepping beside her. The young tactical officer's face was gaunt, his eyes reflecting the same weariness Nia felt. "The data shows they waited 5 years, watching us, learning our patterns. They hit every major military installation simultaneously. By their calculations, we should have been crippled within the first hour." Nia nodded slowly. By their calculations, she turned to face him. "They studied our military, our weapons, our tactics, but they didn't understand what made us human. The Crithian trap had been perfect on paper. They had emerged from hyperspace at 0000 hours, when human circadian rhythms were at their lowest point. Coordinated strikes hit Earth's lunar bases, the Mars colonies, and every orbital defense platform within minutes. Their jamming technology was sophisticated enough to prevent real-time communication between human forces. They had even deployed a gravitational disruption field that made faster-than-light travel impossible within the solar system. Humanity was isolated, fragmented, and under siege, exactly as the Crithians had planned. What they hadn't planned for was humanity's response. Commander Nia Rodriguez had been off duty when the attack began, sleeping in her quarters aboard the Defiant. The klaxons woke her instantly, and within 90 seconds she was on the bridge. The situation displays showed red across every sector. Conventional military doctrine would have called for retreat, regroup, and counterattack, but there was nowhere to retreat to. So Nia did something the Crithians couldn't have predicted from their 5 years of observation. She improvised. "Liam, I need you to explain something to me," she had said during those first chaotic minutes. The Crithians blocked FTL, but did they account for the civilian transport network? The young officer's eyes had widened. The mass drivers, the cargo catapults between colonies, they're purely ballistic, no FTL, no advanced propulsion. Exactly. And they've been operating for decades. The Crithians monitored our military communications, but did they monitor every shipping manifest, every cargo trajectory, every mining operation in the asteroid belt? The answer was no. Humanity had been colonizing space not with grand military campaigns, but with miners, traders, and colonists who had spent generations adapting to the harsh reality of space. They had built infrastructure not for war but for survival. Thousands of vessels that the Crithians had dismissed as irrelevant or haulers, construction platforms, ice miners, solar sail freighters became weapons in human hands. Nia had coordinated it through the one network the Crithians hadn't bothered to jam, the emergency broadcast system used by civilian search and rescue. Within 2 hours, every human settlement from Mercury to the Kuiper Belt knew the plan. The asteroid miners of Ceres had repurposed their mass drivers, turning them into railguns that fired tungsten rods at relativistic speeds. The ice haulers from Europa's ocean stations became kamikaze vessels, piloted remotely into Crithian capital ships, their fusion reactors set to overload on impact. The solar sail cargo vessels, dismissed as primitively slow, had spent the last 3 hours of the battle maneuvering into position, their massive reflective surfaces focusing the sun's radiation into concentrated beams that carved through Crithian shields like paper. And the colonists themselves, scientists, engineers, families who had left Earth seeking new lives among the stars, they had fought with a ferocity that shocked their attackers. When Crithian boarding parties breached the Mars colony domes, they found not cowering civilians, but miners wielding industrial cutting torches, and construction workers who turned zero-gravity work suits into makeshift armor. The Crithians made one critical error, Liam said now, as they stood watching the debris field. He pulled up a holographic display showing the enemy fleet's final moments. They assumed that because we separated our military and civilian populations, the civilians wouldn't fight. They thought cutting off our military command structure would leave everyone else helpless. Nia smiled grimly. They didn't realize that every human is a survivor. Our ancestors climbed down from the trees and spread across an entire planet, not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they refused to give up. Because when cornered, when trapped, when told they couldn't possibly win, she paused, remembering the desperate hours of battle. We find a way anyway. The final engagement had been decisive. The Crithian flagship, the Absolute Dominion, had been surrounded by what its sensors identified as civilian vessels unarmed, no threat. But those ice haulers and/or freighters had been crewed by humans who had spent their lives navigating asteroid fields and landing on comets. Their piloting skills, honed by years in the most unforgiving environment imaginable, allowed them to outmaneuver the Crithian fighter craft. When the Absolute Dominion tried to activate its planet killer weapon, targeting Earth itself in a final act of spite, it found its power conduits severed. A single mining shuttle, piloted by a grandmother who had spent 40 years boring into asteroids, had used her industrial plasma cutter to slice through the flagship's hull. At exactly the right point, she hadn't survived the action, but her sacrifice had saved billions. They tried to trap us, Nia said quietly, placing her hand against the cold viewport. They studied us for 5 years, planned for every contingency, struck at our weakest moment. By every tactical analysis, they should have won. Liam nodded. But they didn't understand the one thing that defines humanity. We're not just soldiers or civilians, warriors or scientists. Every human carries the legacy of ancestors who survived ice ages and predators, plagues and famines. We're a species that turns every tool into a weapon and every obstacle into a stepping stone. As they watched, salvage crews began moving through the debris field, already analyzing Crithian technology, already learning, already adapting. Humanity would take what they had learned from this battle and grow stronger. The trap had failed, and now the galaxy would learn what happens when you corner the most adaptable species. Ever to reach for the stars, send a message through all channels, Nia ordered, her voice carrying the weight of authority earned through fire and survival. Broadcasted in every language, every frequency. Let the Crithians hear it. Let every species that watches from the shadows hear it. Liam prepared the transmission array. What's the message, Commander? Nia's eyes hardened. Tell them, humanity does not yield. They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds.